Hello, Internet. I'm Jackie Fox. Welcome to another installment of Jackie Fox's Book Club. Today, I'm going to be reading you Level 1 of Athena's Chosen. Couple things that I do want to say. This is definitely the entry point that I would choose for most people. It is the shortest book in the series, so it's a lot more bite-sized. That also means that I can sell it at a lower price, so it's a more affordable entry point into the series, as some of the other books can be a bit thicker. But it is fun. It's based on a tabletop campaign that I did with 4 friends, and basically, like, we ran through a world that I had created using a magic system that was based on basically reading books and learning. Some of them took to that system really well, got kind of OP. And that reflects in the trilogy for sure, like who was the most OP about seeking knowledge. But it is kind of set thematically within a video game world. The chapters are called levels, and the prologue here, which is what I'm going to read today, is called a demo. So this is going to be Athena's Chosen, Codex 2.1, so it starts kind of in the middle of the series. But it's the first in its trilogy, and I think it's the best entry point for people who are new to my work. So join me for this trip to Purgatory. The dim glow of the figure hanging in the center of the room like some kind of light bulb was enough for the 3 of them to make out each other's faces, and a few other details of this room they'd all been seemingly summoned to. Mana, a young force witch, looks through the luminescent figure in the center of the room and sees another, a being unlike any she'd seen before. It was small, and its figure almost clung to a barrel behind it, as it seemed to hide in the shadows reflexively. This creature's name was Yeet. Called shadows simply enough by their own people, their tribe was called the Wildlings by outsiders. Yeet stares up at the figure in the center of the room, assuming it to be a god. "My name is Athena." The voice rings through their ears, though not one of their mouths move. "I am the one who watches over power, and I have found each of you to have potential. You will all find others like yourselves. Some friends, others approximations of enemies. You must tell them apart to continue on." "That wasn't you?" Yeet says, voice shaky, looking up at the wolf-like creature in the air before them. "My name is Lupine, and no, that was not my voice. I would wager this Athena has brought us here." Lupine's voice is soft, but still commanding. Mana is unsure of the creature, beast-like, but in a more or less human body, and transparent as the spirits that haunted Niflheim. Her heart briefly stopped as its eyes caught hers. Those spirits, known as Gui, were known to be able to take the bodies of anyone who looked into their eyes. Could this be one of the enemies that Athena had mentioned? Or could it be the shadow across from her? No, she thought. I still have my body, and that thing is more scared of us than we are of it. "You must be thinking I'm a monster," Lupine says, seeing the fear in her eyes. "I assure you, we are safe in this room. As a war chief, I can sense hostility, and in this room I feel only fear. Outside, however..." From above, they hear the sounds of howling and things crashing against the walls. Mana looks up and sees 2 windows. The door is where a great amount of the sounds are coming from, so instead she focuses on windows as she begins to move barrels, finding many of them to be empty and easier to move. She stacks a few under the window as Yeet collects bottles of wine, and Lupine pockets a mage's battery. "Yeet!" they reply, letting her know their name. "Yeet?" Mana repeats, confused. "Yeet!" Yeet says excitedly. "What's your name?" "My name is Mana. It's a pleasure to meet you, Yeet," she says hesitantly. "Yeet indeed," Yeet says excitedly. From outside, shouting breaks their concentration. "Help us! We're in the eye!" What are they saying? It's a trap. They're the enemies, like the wolf said. Yeet says warily. Lupine. Lupine corrects the shadow. Yeet! Yeet says excitedly. Another voice from inside, coming from a body that had just seemed to appear before them, breaks their concentration again, as none of them had known someone else had been listening. What is that thing, a Pokemon? Yeet? Yeet asks. And who are you? Lupine addresses the knight, noticing a sort of name tag over his head that reads Algary01. I suppose you can call me Gary motherfucking Oak. Now how do I catch this thing? Gary says, drawing his sword. I believe this one is hostile, Lupine says. I'm only a Force Witch, but I can see that, Mana says. Yeet doesn't like this, Yeet says, as their hands morph into thick black claws. Wait, Mana screams, her shrill voice stopping each of them in their tracks. We don't have to fight. She's correct, replies a male voice in all of their heads. I am Logos, and I will guide you. Only allies of Athena can hear my voice, and so, if you hear me, say I am Athena's chosen. Now. At once, the four reply, I am Athena's chosen. After this, Gary is the first to break their silence. So I guess you, folks aren't NPCs then? Well, maybe we should start by checking the windows. Yes, Logos replies. It's usually best to know one's surroundings before marching out blindly into battle. So, Gary says, I guess you aren't some Tana staffer, but you're like an AI, right? I am a god, and you will respect me as such, Logos says. All right. Now, why is it so hot in a cellar? He asks. Well, you are wearing plate armor, which seems pretty superfluous in what seems to be a wine cellar, Mana suggests. True that, the knight says, and removes his gauntlets, followed by his chestplate. That's a relief, he says, opening his arms for a hug and revealing a sweaty t-shirt underneath that had been dyed in ways that none of them had ever seen, bearing the numbers 69. Mana backs away from the offered hug as Lupine and Yeet maintain a certain distance as well. Something wasn't right about this man, or his seemingly carefree attitude in such a tense situation. In what only seemed to be minutes ago, they had just been snatched, possibly from the many worlds themselves, and placed here, in a world even Lupine didn't know of. Yeet begins to climb the stack of barrels that Mana had made and peers through the window, seeing swirling magics and darkness. It appeared to be night, and the eye they had heard mentioned earlier now made sense. They seemed to be in the eye of a hurricane, and things were about to get bad. Calling to the others, Yeet relays the situation. Mana, what kind of witch did you say you were? Lupine asks. Did I hear you say you were a Force Witch? Mana nods. My element of focus is wind. My mother taught me. She's an Angeal. Lupine is familiar with the word from the religion that they had begun to practice after becoming a realm walker. Angeal were from a realm called Tartarus, the children of the gods themselves. So that makes you a demi-human yourself then. How well do you control your powers? Have you learned nuclear magic yet? No, not yet, Mana says sheepishly. But I promise I'm a good witch. Then, I suppose you may know something about stopping a hurricane, Lupine asks. Well, in theory, you just stop the cyclonic movement, but... Mana looks down at the dirt floor of the cellar as she hears the intense wind batter the building around them. I think you know more than enough, Lupine says, their hand warm as it sinks into her shoulder, easing her muscles, and for once she thinks clearly with that tension lifted. You're right. I can, she says as she marches up the stairs and places her hand on the door as they rattle madly against their hinges, suddenly appearing as though they might rip free at any moment. But no sooner have the first few bolts shaken loose does the wind stop. Brimming with magic and a sinister look on her face, she turns to them. We can leave in a moment, but for now, we talk. Who are you? Gary answers first. I'm Gary. I'm from a place called South Carolina, and I'm testing out a new game called Athena's Champions that the guys over at Tanatech are working on. I guess you guys are too, right? Lupin answers second. I was the elder chieftain of the beast folk in life. A dragoon named Lanceheart and a dragon marched into our town and demanded our obedience to the god Emperor Nero. We did not submit to his will, and we were almost nearly made extinct by fire. Moananya ripped my soul from flesh so that I would have no rest hereafter. And since I have walked the worlds, learning of the spiritual beings known by many as gods. My name is Lupin. Whoa now, so this is a part of the game, Gary asks, seemingly suddenly very excited. Sweet! I don't know this game you speak of, but it may be best to take our challenges seriously, lest a god smite you and make your head explode, Lupin says, sounding cold. Geez, what about you, witch? Gary asks. Mana, she reminds them. I was born in Folkvang, the city of the folk. I studied magic there with my sisters before my mother sent me out to make her living for us on the farms. Usually our kind cannot work the fields, but my mother has a connection with the harmonists. And mother is a daughter of a Nephilim? Lupin asks, knowing the figures from his study of the spiritual religions revolving around the Monad and the Yggdrasil. She says my grandfather is an Aeon, Ainos, but the folk don't talk much about the old gods. Mana answers, and then turns to Yeet. What about you? I'm Yeet, a trader among the shadows. My wares are legitimate and of the highest quality, but I fear we are far from my cache in Terra Nova. Oh, so you're from Terra Nova. There, my people know you as wildlings, but you prefer shadow, is it? Lupin asks. Just because Yeet's people live in tribes doesn't mean we're savages, you know? Yeet says defensively. So the Pokemon can talk, then? Gary says. I do not know this name, Lupin says, but I must insist you stop using it. As I said, they prefer shadow. Fine, no need to get all PC with me, bro, Gary says as he crosses his arms. Shouldn't we be leaving now? He asks as he begins to make his way up the stairs. Shouldn't you put your armor back on first? Mana asks, and Logos follows up with a warning. The source of the storms may be beyond that door. So, at least the chestplate would probably be a good idea. After all, Psinesis is literally a killing machine. Who? Gary asks. Lupin vaguely remembers the name from legends, but doesn't reveal this. After all, these were illusions, made to test them. It wasn't a measure of raw strength. Why would a god want that in a mortal? Gods have power, but they often lack morals, and thus they value these traits in mortals. This would test their valor and their purity of heart more so than their bodies, and as such, Lupin was confident. Even if they were to fight the god killer herself, they would win this fight if they fought with all their heart. Put your armor on already so we can go, Yeet says, growing antsy and pacing rapidly at the base of the stairs, moving on all fours. Lupin sees the creature and knows a scout, a first striker when he sees one. With proper training, he could defeat enemies before they could even strike. The witch was on a path to nuclear magic already, which could provide raw power, and the knight, well, he didn't seem entirely trustworthy, serious, or competent. Ready for a fight, the four of them open the heavy bar on the door and open it to see what appears to be a frantic crow person. Why in Niflheim wouldn't you let me in? There was a monad-cursed hurricane out there. You saw what I did to that storm, and you thought it was a good idea to stand by the door? Mana counters. What is your name, Crow? I'm Nox, and I'm half raven, thank you, he says confidently. Your father was a raven? Gary asks. I don't even see how that's possible. I mean, ravens and humans aren't even remotely the same species. And even if they were, we aren't even remotely the same. My mother was a raven, actually. A god raven, Nox replies, calmly as he sticks his beak out in Gary's direction. That actually makes even less sense. How does a female raven, god or not, have or even carry a human-sized child? Gary asks. Of course, she took human form to bed my father and carry me, but she returned to being a raven and left me. This was my first memory, so you cannot deny it, Nox says defiantly, clicking his beak almost menacingly to enunciate his words as he spoke. So hold your tongue, mortal. Is there a god in this whole game that doesn't have a short fuse? Gary complains. Probably not if you keep calling this a game, Lupin suggests. From behind them they feel a powerful wind. In the sky above is a mechanical form, vaguely female, with wings that seem to be creating the draft of wind. Her arms consist of combinations of blades and guns. She wasn't even built for diplomacy, because Lupin couldn't imagine anything safely shaking those hands. Mana realizes this must be the killing machine Logos had mentioned earlier, Synesis. Below her, if you could assign a body like that a gender, was a knight, and a creature that looked a bit like Nox, but with white wings and a human face obscured by the fact that she's wearing a blindfold. In order, they say, I am not Synesis, but it is my wrath which will rain down upon you. I am not sin, but my justice burns to cut you down. I am not Winchester, but I am here to defend these two women should they need it. God damn it, this armor is too heavy. I barely have any AP, Gary says as they begin to hear an angelic chorus in the background ring in the fight. You know, Logo says, we resent you asking us to damn things so familiarly. As Gary complains, Yeet leaps for Sin, who tries to beat them back with a sword, but their large claws are just a bit too nimble, and injure the Angeal where it stands. Above, the Nephilim Synesis rains down exploding feathers that spray the field with shrapnel, which draws everyone's blood but Gary's and Lupin's, though in the latter case, because immaterial spirits have no blood to bleed. Lupin raises a force barrier in front of themselves, not wanting to push their luck further. Safely behind the barrier, they fire a concentrated beam of light that gravely enters the knight's arm, cutting right through Winchester's gauntlets. When do I get a turn? Gary asks, as Mana unleashes a shockwave of force that damages all three of their foes, following this with a gale of wind to the knight's chest. I suggest you cover one of us, probably the witch, as I have my own shield and Yeet isn't so easy to pin down, Lupin orders. I'm not sure if I can move that fast in all this, Gary says, sounding defeated as Sin flies straight towards him. Her sword, shaped a bit like an executioner's axe, was headed straight for his head. Is anyone blocking for me? He asks as Sin's sword clangs off of his armor. At least the one you're fighting is blind, Mana shouts as the opposing knight advances, proving far more capable of moving under their armor than Gary. But sure, I'll just run behind you when the knight catches up with me, okay? She was half sarcastic and half serious as her foe's armor begins to glow in blues and yellows. Is that a buff? Gary asks. Do I have that? You're a knight. You tell us. And yes, he does seem to have increased his defense and speed as well. Lupin confirms, just as everything momentarily stops and they are each slammed to the ground, Gary knocked unconscious by his own armor, Yeet stunned and seeing blackness and stars for a moment, but Mana and Lupin, on the other hand, seem to have weathered the attack well, though their auras seem momentarily diminished, and Lupin's wall appears to be cracking and collapsing from the blow. I've lost my cover, Mana says, a little exasperated with whatever king or lord had made that asshole a knight. Lupin erects a brand new force shield in front of her and then fires a second beam of light, striking the knight's chest plate dead on before the knight falls dead himself, and then his body simply vanishes, as Yeet seems to regain their senses and catches Sin off guard, and buries their claws deep into the Angeal's back. Mana's body overflows with the energy she had drawn from the storm, creating an updraft that places her eye to eye with Cynesis. You fly without wings? Perhaps mortals aren't such lowly beings after all. Goodbye, my great auntie, she says in memoriam to a woman of divine origins who she's never met, as her magic rips apart the constructed body in front of her. There is only a beautiful female spirit before her now, her divine ancestor. Visit us in Pleroma, she says, as hers and Sin's body begin to fade away, and a new figure appears in their place. In a powder blue dress with short blonde hair, a shockingly muscular frame and olive skin, a woman stands in front of an alchemic pattern before them, turning from the glyph she had emerged from to greet them, for once in person. I am Athena, the one who watches over power. Alchemists like myself, alongside sorcerers and sorceresses, are attempting to balance the magical forces in the many worlds. But their efforts alone will not be enough to see the worlds through. Many problems are left in their wake. And that's where you come in. Having passed my challenge, at least most of you, you may choose a world you know of to enter from this point out. So Mana, you're from Tartarus, right? Lupine asks. And I'm from Earth, Gary volunteers. And I'm from the world of god dragons, Terra Nova, Yeet says dramatically. So would Terra Nova be a safer place to start than Tartarus? And what about Earth? Mana asks. Earth is beyond my ability to transport you, I'm afraid. If you go there, it will be of your own power, Athena says. So, Terra Nova or Tartarus? Well, Lupine offers, one of our gods, Nidogr, became the elder god dragon by eating the previous holder of that title. This dragon is far more powerful than even the one who butchered and cooked my people and rend my soul from flesh. So, not very safe, Mana asks, and Athena begins to smile. I too enjoy the idea of seeing Tartarus again, Athena says, sounding suddenly sweet and innocent. Tartarus it is, then, Mana and Lupine say at once. I'm sorry about this, Gary, Athena says as the landscape shifts under alchemical glyphs. The five of them find themselves under a great tree looking out at a great dragon that holds in its hands many suns. That's much bigger than Nidogr, Lupine says in amazement. And that's the prologue, and I definitely got that done in under 30 minutes. Cool. I'm liking my chapter lengths for this. This actually might be a lot easier to edit than I've been thinking, and I'm totally thinking about reading through maybe an entire book. If I do that, though, I would really appreciate if you do end up listening through, if you could send me a couple dollars on Coffee or Patreon. That would be greatly appreciated, seeing as you're basically getting to hear me read my book to you. I think that's pretty great, and if you send me like $3 for a book, that's still probably more than I'm going to make from Amazon, even if you buy a paperback. So they're kind of fucking me pretty hard on the profit share, just saying. So if you could send Annie, please send money, is what I'm saying. Thank you. And like and subscribe if you liked this and enjoy the idea of me reading my books to you. I would actually really enjoy that. I would love to do that. The times I've tested this in the past, I didn't actually read it, and it didn't get such a great reception, but hopefully my voice brings a level of interest to it that doing it in speech-to-text generators just was not accomplishing. So hopefully a lot of you will like this video and kind of give me the cue to do more of these, and I hope I get to see you in the next one. Until then.